I wish to speak to you as a scientist, and I will focus on the science. A lot of people talk about science, but not all of them are scientists, and many of the scientists who speak to you are not scientists in the area that they are supposed to be speaking about. I mean, you hear people, physicists, for example, will say that there can be no biological effects for non-thermal radiation. Well, the fact of the matter is they have not read the literature. I think one of the things you will walk away with after my talk is that there is evidence. You may not be able to evaluate it, but I'm telling you that this is evidence that's been published, it's been replicated, and it's been judged by scientists who are capable of judging it, that the electromagnetic fields of a variety of frequencies can cause biological effects, important biological effects, including damage to some fundamental molecules. And furthermore, that we have a fair idea of what the mechanism is. In other words, that there are ways in which we can understand how this can come about. And part of the answer to that mechanism comes from the evidence of the biological molecules themselves. Because if you know the right language, the cells can tell you what they are doing. In other words, we can act as translators of the biology to tell you what the cell is trying to do. And that's the thing that we have been able to do. All of this evidence points out to the fact that what the standards that we have today are totally inadequate. And that as any reasonable person, and this is something where I'm taking off my cap as a scientist and putting on my general cap as a citizen, and that is that when you come across situations where you find that there is a potential danger, you try and avoid it. You try and avoid it before it becomes a real danger. This is known as the precautionary principle, and there's every reason to invoke that principle and to apply it in this case. One of the molecules that is made by the DNA is an indication of stress. I put this down, that the cellular stress response. We all know that when an organism gets into trouble, there are special secretions. We know about adrenaline, we know about cortisol. These are things that are secreted by the body to mobilize so that you can run and that you can fight and you get your energy mobilized. That's true on an organismic level. But each cell has its own defense mechanism, and this is known as the cellular stress response. This is something that when a cell comes in contact with an unfriendly environment is something where the temperature is raised, where the pH, the acidity changes, and it's something that's going to endanger it. In other words, a condition that's not good for the cell to survive. It comes apart, the DNA in certain regions comes apart and starts to read the code to make stress proteins. Stress proteins there are about 20 of them in nature, and these are the ones that are used by the cell to counteract the bad effects of whatever the stimulus is in the environment that set it off. So that the stress protein is an indication by the cell in its own language that it has come in contact with something that is bad for it, that is potentially harmful. And what it's telling us is that when we know that the cell reacts to EMF in the environment, it is telling you that the cell feels it is potentially harmful. The cell has told us, you can do the experiment yourself, it will make stress proteins, and it only makes the stress proteins when it is in a potentially harmful environment, and it makes it with EMF. We have found that it makes it with EMF in the ELF in the lowest frequency range. It makes it in radio frequency range. We know it makes it pretty much over the entire span. Probably the most important part is the public education campaign. That is, people must be made aware of this issue. They must realize that even though they cannot see it or feel it, it's having its effect, and that these effects are cumulative, many are slow acting, and that you really can't beat it. Thank you.